Hello, everybody. Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report, Monday's edition, broadcasting from Louisville, Kentucky. Happy to have everybody with us on this holiday special edition. Folks, this week we're going to be doing a few of the TV shows and podcasts, basically summarizing the year end in the first year of Joe Biden's presidency. We'll talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly and where we are. But first, again, hope everybody had a Merry Christmas. Christmas Eve, Christmas Day. I'll tell you what, it was something else traveling throughout the country. I saw some crazy stuff, and I'm going to share it with all of you. But again, it's really happy to have you with us here on the day after Christmas. And let's get right into it. Some of the things that have occurred just since we were together last week. I'll tell you, first and foremost, folks, it is quite an adventure traveling nowadays. You guys have all heard the reports about flight cancellations, crews not being able to make it, flight attendants, support personnel. Let me tell you something, it's all true. But I got to tell you, the airlines have my personal anecdotal experience from having flown over the past few days is there are really some terrific people out there, and they're doing as really good a job as they possibly can, you know, given some of these government policies that they're having to deal with. I mean, just last night, His esteemed Highness Fauci was on the news services basically suggesting that we should have vaccine passports for domestic travel. Well, you know, for yours truly, it's not going to affect me because I've been fully vaxxed and boosted. But for a lot of people that listen and watch this show and who I met traveling across the country, there's a lot of unvaccinated people that are traveling. What are you going to do? Tell them you can't go home? I mean, this one really needs to be thought out, folks, because I can share this from personal experiences with you. The flights, you know, went off very well. The people that worked in the airports were terrific. The people at the terminals were great. I know a lot of cancellations happened, particularly at some of the major hubs around our country. And that's likely, it could get worse before it gets better. Now, I'm scheduled to fly tomorrow, so we won't be doing the show tomorrow, but we'll be back on Wednesday. So I'll give you a report on Wednesday if there's any cancellations for what I see at the various airports I'll be traveling in tomorrow. Now, let's tie this into some crazy stuff that's happening with COVID. For all you college football fans, my goodness, bowl games are being canceled left and right. Teams are just basically, because of Omicron variant and the contagiousness of it, they're canceling bowl games because they're not able to put together a full team of players to make it to the bowls. And or the NCAA protocols are such that its teams are not able to successfully travel. And you think that was bad, folks, in college football. Professional football has not been exempted either. For those of you who are football aficionados who like to follow the game or gamble a little bit, you know, teams were like the Baltimore Ravens, among others, Cleveland Browns. A lot of teams their rosters were depleted because of not able to pass COVID protocols. Now, I know the National Football League is addressing this, but most of the issues had to deal with asymptomatic players that continue to test positive. So the NFL is going through adjustments. College football is going through major adjustments. You know, how long is it before our corporations are going to be doing the same thing? Some of them already are. But that was just sort of a snapshot about what happened since the last time we were with you, before the Christmas holidays. So, Anthony Fauci's out there saying we may need to consider vaccine passports for domestic flights. Well, that's going to wreak havoc if that policy ever goes into effect. Bowl games canceled, flight cancellations canceled. It almost seems like we're back at the beginning of the pandemic, but I know we're not. So despite these problems and issues that we're all having to deal with as Americans, for the most part, I think, a lot of people were very happy over the Christmas weekend. On a personal basis, the church that I went to was beautiful. There were people there, half masked, half not masked. So, it was a good outcome. Obviously, any airport you travel to, you have to be masked. People were pretty reasonable about it. If you're on a plane eating or drinking, they let you do it. And if you didn't have your mask on, they politely asked you. So some of the horror stories you hear out there, they're probably true because they happen, but at least my personal experience was one of the people we were dealing with within the travel industry were 100% professional, and I want to tip my hat to them all. Now, let's get to a little bit of news over the weekend. Boy, I got to tell you something. The administration puts out Vice President Harris to talk on the CBS News Sunday morning show hosted by Margaret Brennan. What a disaster. The vice president, every time she goes on and they try to let her speak for herself, it's a disaster. And this is no change. I mean, Margaret Brennan, the host of CBS Sunday Morning, basically asked her a question about what's the most serious threat to the United States. And you know what this buffoon, this vice president who knows nothing, said? Domestic election issues. That's what she deems as the most serious threat to the United States. I mean, come on, folks. We're competing with the Chinese. The Chinese are threatening Taiwan. They're building up their military. The Russians were on the border of Ukraine, and our esteemed, brilliant vice president, who's never even traveled to Europe previously before becoming part of the administration, says the biggest issue facing this country is the issues of elections. I mean, come on. What do they think? They're stupid? Just because a few far left-wing radical kooks think that's a big deal, when in fact, virtually everyone who wants to vote did get a chance to vote. No one was prohibited from voting. I mean, that is among the most absurd things I've ever seen. And it came from a vice president whose approval rating is clearly justifiable, somewhere around 28 to 35%. I mean, folks, you heard the old saying, every day we pray for Joe Biden's health. Well, I'm telling you something, if you're not, you ought to, because it is frightening, the prospect that if something happened to Joe Biden, that this vice president would assume the role of president. God help us if something like that happened. She is no more qualified to be president. It is a travesty that Biden even put her on the ticket. And just with answers to basic questions like that, it's a shocking situation that we're in, where we have, the two top executives of our country, in this situation. So, it's not good, but, we're going to have to deal with it. And no wonder they don't put her out there, folks. It was an absolute embarrassment having to watch that interview. And I'm sorry, but it's really bad. So, again, in this joyous season, we try not to get too much into the weeds, but when something sort of stands out like a sore thumb, man, we got to talk about it. Now, look, I'll give Biden credit about one thing. There was a lot of news made about a comment. He was on the phone with someone, and at the end of the call, the guy said, "Let's go, Brandon." The guy was not serious. And I think Biden joked back to him, "Yeah, let's go, Brandon," or something along those lines. Kudos to the president, at least, for having a little bit of sense of humor for someone who was clearly just joking with him, who apparently had a nice conversation with. You know what? Maybe that's something good. If we can have a little humility in our politics, a little laughter, a little levity at times with all the seriousness and hatefulness among members of Congress and the administration, we'll give the president a tip of the hat on that one. Whether he heard it or not, who knows? Repeated it back, laughed it off. I thought he was a pretty good sport about it. Unlike our vice president, who wouldn't have a clue what to do on something like that. Now, let's talk about one thing, though, and God, you hate seeing this, but a new opinion poll came out just today. Well-respected polling company. Folks, it's got the president's approval at 36%. That's a new all-time low. I mean, we haven't seen polling numbers that low. And as we've been telling you, if you continue to pile up these policy blunders one after another, it's going to take its toll. The president was upside down among every group. I mean, the only group he was above board was among Democrats, and barely. I mean, he was like 47% to 44% among Democrats, approving, disapproving of the job he's doing. Look, this is not surprising. When you come in and you promise normalcy, okay, and we get anything but. Now, look, I'm not blaming the president for the Omicron variant surge. I think he's finally come to the realization in a conference call he had with governors that basically the government can try to help this situation, but it's not going to be able to prevent the spread. Excuse me. So, we're in a situation where this variant is spreading. The government now is coming out. We're going to be sending the government's going to be sending 500 million test kits. And that's not going out till January. But you just look at the lines of people. I think that, honestly, I believe the government, the administration, unnecessarily has people concerned, upset, freaked out. I mean, you see these lines for people standing in line to get tested. I mean, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I mean, if you're feeling good and you no symptoms, why would you get in line to be tested? But a lot of people are doing it. I guess that's because of the messaging from the administration. They've got people all concerned. Well, could that be some of the reasons why we're having some of these problems? I guess it is. But, I think there's a quiet acknowledgement setting in the administration and the Democrats who wanted to lead us all down the path of we're going to get to COVID zero sometime. Well, the reality is setting in, and now it's being understood we're never going to get to COVID zero. It's not going to happen. We had the Delta variant, now we had the Omicron variant. You had various scientists talking over the weekend, giving you their opinion. Some of you caught them, some were a little more realistic than others. But the fact of the matter is we have a contagious variant that's much less lethal, much less deadly. I mean, I think yesterday's statistics got quoted in the United States. We had 79, 80 people die of COVID. You think, well, my God, it's really bad. Well, okay, we lost 1,800 to, heart ailments. We lost X amount to cancer. I mean, it happens, and COVID deaths are really plummeting at this point. So it does look like this variant's going to be with us. Now the question is, how are public officials going to deal with this? And that's to be determined, folks. So, again, personal experience, seeing what happened, give people credit. I mean, everywhere we go, I mean, on a personal basis, from traveling through airports, through airplanes, churches, meeting people, people are recognizing, what the issues are, and they're trying to deal with it accordingly. Now, do I think it's having some type of an effect where a lot of people may not want to go back to work because they're concerned about this? Yeah, I believe that. I think that's happening. So, we're going to monitor this. We'll keep an eye on it. I'm going to give you some reports of traveling over the next few days, what the experience is like, and we'll give you some assessment about what's really going on here. But you say to yourself, well, Mark, what are the issues? Why is his approval rating so low? Because look, when you look at the economy, folks, it's doing reasonably well. Okay, our unemployment rate is down in the low 4s. We've gotten back near pandemic levels of employment. We still have 3 million less workers now than we had when the pandemic started. But there are a lot of good things going on in the economy. Interest rates are low. Real estate prices are escalating. Now, a lot of people are feeling that if you're on the rental side, renting property, oh boy, you're seeing some increases. We would encourage anyone who's watching the show who's having to deal with that, talk to your landlord, work with them. Most people are pretty reasonable, okay? But, there are pockets of strength in the economy, and there's pockets of weakness. Stock market, Dow Jones, S&P 500, and the NASDAQ hovering near or at all-time highs. Now, that's a product of easy money and low interest rates. But the question is, Powell has said he's going to start that tapering. And he has. Supposedly, there are going to be some interest rate increases next year, but the market is viewing this as a favorable recovery. So it's not all bad out there, folks. So why is his approval rating so low? Well, I've thought about it, and I've done some reading and some analysis, and I'm going to lay the following out for you. His approval started to fall when the Afghanistan debacle happened. He had been pretty high up until that point. Then the inflation piece kicked in. Now, all of a sudden, people are saying our foreign policy was a debacle. We couldn't even handle an exit from Afghanistan properly. Inflation's hitting people in the pocketbook. Food prices up, rent prices up, gasoline prices up. Okay, so the president and the Democrats are getting blamed for that. Crime is way up, particularly in these blue cities. I mean, news came out about Philadelphia. Philadelphia's had 2,200 shootings so far this year. 521 people have been killed. Folks, that's more people killed in Philadelphia, which is not our largest city, than New York, Los Angeles, Chicago. I mean, that's not a statistic you want to be affiliated with, but it's happening. People are concerned. They saw the debacle with Afghanistan. They've seen inflation ravage their paychecks. They're seeing crime going up in a lot of these cities and suburbs. People are not exactly feeling secure. So, when you have situations like that, then people look around and say, well, let me put my finger at something. Well, no, the border, you still have problems down there. You see issues related to that. And then you look and say, in this opinion poll, folks, where the president was 36, and by the way, the vice president was lower than that. We're not even going to get into her numbers are so bad. But 45 out of 50 states, he's upside down and by a lot. Let me give you the 5 states where he is above water, and one of them's barely, and that's California. In California, the president's only up 1 point, 46 to 45 approval. That's in deep blue California, folks. Other states, Hawaii, that's among the bluest of the blue. Massachusetts, again, bluest of the blue. Maryland, deep blue. Vermont, home of Bernie Sanders, deep blue. Folks, you do not win elections just being barely above water in 5 deep blue states. Where you have 45 states, you're upside down. What he's going to do to turn that around, I don't know. We've been suggesting on this show literally for months that he needs to turn this administration around, do what Bill Clinton did, triangulate towards the center and away from these far left-wing radical policies, and maybe get the American people behind him again. Look, for all his faults, he doesn't come across as, anything but an affable type guy. He's a decent guy, I believe, but just he's being pulled left by all these policies. And again, like we said on the show many, many times, he's our president too. Whether we agree with his policies or not, we want him to do well, because if he does well, the country does well. But folks, right now, 45 out of 50 states saying, well, this guy's way upside down. And we listed some of the reasons why, and that's what people are telling the pollsters. Now, it goes beyond the aspect, though, of inflation, illegal immigration, crime, COVID. There's a lot more to it. Think about this. All right. Before we left, Manchin put the dagger in the Build Back Better bill. Thank God for Joe Manchin. Predictably, the Democrats started attacking him. And then some of the more reasonable ones said, no, we got to stop these attacks. We need Joe Manchin for any bill to pass. Well, as we've all told you, Mitch McConnell and the Republicans would welcome Joe Manchin with open arms to the Republican Party. In our best dreams, we would love to have Joe come over and join our side of the equation, because then Mitch McConnell would be Senate Majority Leader. And all of this horrific legislation that the Democrats and the radicals and Schumer are trying to push through will not happen. McConnell will not allow it to come to the floor. But what are they going to do now? Well, Senator Ben Cardin was on a television show over the weekend, and he was talking about the fact that there's going to have to be skinny, slimmed down versions that's going to disappoint a lot of people if they ever expect to get any part of Build Back Better through. That may be the right strategy that the Democrats need to do. Manchin was never going to support a gigantic piece of legislation. $1.75 trillion, by the time he got done scoring up the CBO, was $5 trillion over 10 years. He wouldn't go for it. Now, according to some Democrats, Schumer, this guy, how he became majority leader, who knows? But he's no rocket scientist. Looks like he's going to make people come back after the holidays and cast a vote just so they can go on record. Okay, fine. It'll get defeated. We'll move on. But then it looks like, the Democrats are going to try to maybe skinny it down a little bit, get certain provisions. We'll stay on top of it for you, folks. Keep an eye on it. I think something may come out of it, but it's going to be way, way, way reduced. You and I both know that the progressive lunatic left will never agree to what the vast majority of the American people want. They just won't. That's not in their DNA. So will they come back with something skinny? Maybe. Will they come back with something that is bipartisan? If they could get a bipartisan bill through before, which they did on the real infrastructure bill, I got to believe they could, if they tried this human infrastructure bill and whittled it down to really, really important stuff, maybe they could get some Republicans on board if it was dramatically changed. And you know what? The hell with them. If the liberal Democrats don't like it, who cares what they think? They're in such a minority anyhow. So let's see what Schumer comes up with. You know they're going to try to do something. They're not just going to let Build Back Better die. And the Democrats will continue lying to their base in the hopes of keeping them afloat. Now, other things that happened over the weekend, folks. The panic mode among the Democratic Party is palpable. Did you see those numbers? The Hispanics voters in this country have turned, they're now more in Republican camp than Democratic camp. That's right. More Hispanics favor Republicans than Democrats. To me, it's no surprise. I mean, the same issues that every American's interested, whether you're white, black, Hispanic, Asian, you name it, doesn't matter. Most people want the same things. They want reasonable costs. They don't want inflation. They want reasonable gas prices. Again, they don't want to keep paying a whole lot for filling up their car. They want to have a safe community living in. Everybody, no one likes crime. No one wants to see hundreds of thousands of illegals come across that Rio Grande every month. We don't want to see that. We want our borders protected. Doesn't matter what color, what race, gender you come from. Most people want this similar type things. Well, the Biden administration is not delivering it. But I do want to go through on this year-end edition. And we're going to cover some of it today, and we'll cover some more of it, on Wednesday, Thursday this week, because we want to keep it a little light during the holidays. But what are the Democrats trying to do now? They're trying to pivot to a non-issue. That's right. I said voting rights. My God almighty, you think that was the be-all, end-all. And they're trying once again because they had nothing to fall back on. Now they're going to try to create a divisive issue called voting rights. Folks, we just had an election back in 2020. The Democrats won the election. Yeah, we're not going to get into what happened. I mean, that's ancient news and we're moving forward. And we had an election in November of 2021 that Republicans did great in. Now what are the Democrats doing? Oh, well, people aren't having the right to vote. We're trying to prevent them from voting. Folks, you and I know that's baloney. If I listed out for you the top 10 issues that American people care about, you know where voting rights would be? It wouldn't even make it. If I listed 20 issues, two at the very bottom would be voting rights and climate change. People, 99+% of Americans, when there's an election, they know where to go to vote. They can either mail it in, they can go to a polling place, drop it off, they can vote in person. This garbage that the Democrats try to put out that, we're restricting voting rights, it's all a smokescreen. And the effort to federalize these elections is nothing more than a power grab by Democrats, which the courts likely would reject anyhow. And that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to divert from their failures into picking an issue where there is no problem right now. They're just pissed off at some of these red states that have enacted laws such as voter ID, which, by the way, 85% of the public likes, okay? And they're trying to create a divisive issue. We'll get into more of that a little bit later in the week. But just a couple little things. In other words, why is his approval down there? Okay, Democrats promised voting rights. They haven't delivered one thing on voting rights. I don't think there's anything they need to be delivered on voting rights. It's not a big issue. Climate change. Okay, Build Back Better, it didn't pass. Climate change bill, nothing came in that bill. Democrats are all ticked off about it. Well, I got news for you, folks. And I'm joking, it's not being half serious. In the Midwest and the Mid-South, Christmas Day, it hit 75 degrees where I was yesterday in an area which is normally in the 40s. If that's a result of climate change, God bless, let's have it every year. All kidding aside, there's bad weather wreaking havoc on the West Coast, Seattle all the way to San Diego. I know this thing comes in spurts based on weather patterns. I'm not trying to make light of it. The fact is, again, folks, if you list the top 20 issues that Americans are concerned about, climate change comes in like 18 or 19. Then you have to ask yourself a question. Why are the Democrats putting so much political capital into issues that rank near the bottom of the list? Well, I'll tell you why. Because the far left-wing radicals that control that party and are pushing President Biden For some reason, it's important to them. And they're governing against the wishes of 75, 80% of the public. We'll get into it a little bit more, but excuse me, think about that. That's some of the reasons that you're running into these bad approval ratings. The Democrats promised there would be some relief on prescription drugs. That hasn't happened. That didn't make it out of the Build Back Better bill. Okay. I mean, could there be some good come from that? I guess there could, but nothing's happened on that. And that was an important issue to Democrats. Okay. Raising taxes. Well, that didn't happen either. Yeah, some marginal taxes went up on the initial bill, nominal things. Did not affect 98% of Americans. And then when Build Back Better fell apart, well, obviously all the tax increases contemplated, and that didn't happen. You would think that's a good thing. Most Americans, oh, good. Granted, we don't have to pay more taxes. Nope, not in the Democrat. In the Democrats' world, you and me, everybody in our viewing audience, anyone making X amount of money, you're bad. You're the you're no good. You need to pay more taxes. No, most people don't think that way. Most people are happy there were no tax increases, but not the Democrats. They're pissed off about it. And you know what? Normally, if they're pissed off, that means it's good that it didn't happen. So that's just a few things, and we're going to get into more stuff throughout the week as it goes, but no progress on voting rights. That was a hot button for them. No progress on climate change. Again, hot button for them. Nobody else cares about it. Prescription drugs. Everybody would like to see a little bit lower prescription drug costs. Maybe it'll come through the open market and competition. Okay. And then who wants tax increases? Well, no Republicans do, but that's a hot button among Democrats. And then, what are some of the other issues important to Democrats? Well, all this transgender stuff going on, that's a hot button for Democrats. Again, does it affect 1%, less than 1% of the public? It affects half of 1%, a quarter of 1%. And yet, what are you seeing? You're seeing guys go out there who are now women and going to swim meets and shattering swim records and keeping regular biologically born women off swim teams. That's ridiculous. But again, the radical left, that's a priority to them. It's not a priority to most of the American people. So things like that. And then, of course, their much trumpeted Build Back Better program that all the Democrats, all but two in the Senate, and one at the end of the day, they complain, wow, it's one person holding up this bill. No, it wasn't. It's 51 or 52. And you had the ALCs in the world and all these liberal Democrats complaining. What they want to do, they want to change the rules. Now that's their next big thing. Well, we're going to try to do a carve out of the filibuster. Okay, we'll keep an eye on it, folks. It's not far-fetched. I'm telling you, when these Democrats lose, it's never the policies that are bad. It's the Republicans that are bad. Well, it's not going to fly. Okay, but that's what they're going to try to do. Anyhow, we'll get into some more of this stuff throughout the week. What are the things really, causing that approval rating to tank like that? We've hit some highlights this afternoon, and there's more to come. But at the end of the day, 2022, it's looking incredibly promising as we close out 2021. Yes, the country's got some issues. Yes, we've got some political problems. Yes, we have a president that doesn't seem like he's there all the time. I'm not going to get into the dementia stuff. I'm not the doctor, but a lot of people are concerned about it. But hopefully, as we remain optimistic through the holidays here, some good things will happen and the country will reemerge in 2022 if the president would just tack a little bit to the middle. It doesn't require a whole lot. Just tack to the middle. Forget about all this garbage of changing the filibuster. Try to focus on getting your arms around the pandemic and focus on the economy. If the administration would do those two things, suck up the fact they lost Build Back Better, come back with a better strategy that is tailored to the 70% of Americans in the middle, then you might have a successful year next year. Barring that, folks, it will be a red bloodbath in the House of Representatives. Who knows how many seats we'll take back? But again, if they keep going down this path, it's going to be a lot. All right, look, I'm really happy you could join us today after this Christmas holiday. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff happening between now and the end of the year. Hopefully we can have a college football playoff championship and that the 4 teams involved, Cincinnati, Alabama, Georgia, Michigan, can get enough players to play safely, okay, because we definitely want to see that. 4 good quality teams in there, and that should be exciting. So anyhow, we'll cover some more stuff as the week goes along. No show tomorrow, folks, because I'm going to be in the air. Hopefully I'm going to be in the air traveling tomorrow. And when we land, hopefully tomorrow, we'll be back up in the studio on Wednesday, broadcasting from beautiful South Florida. And I'll give you all the travel updates from everything going on at multiple places where we're going to be. We're going to get out and talk to the folks, get their feelings. But I got to tell you this, most people, again, from traveling coast to coast, they're very optimistic. Don't believe all this gloom and doom you hear from the mainstream media. People I talk to from around the country, mainly at these airports and landing spots and destinations, most people are optimistic. They recognize we got issues, but Americans, by definition, are optimistic people. And you know what? Our viewing and listening audience is in that same camp. So again, thank you for joining us this day after Christmas. Happy holidays to all Americans. We wish you the best, and we'll be back with you on Wednesday for a special holiday year-end Schaftlein report. Thanks for viewing and listening today. Have a good day. See you Wednesday.